Alright, Radeon 6000 series GPUs have been announced. So here I'm just gonna kind of go over the specs and technologies used, etc, etc, you know the drill. First things first, the process node. This is something people might be curious about since Nvidia changed their 12nm FinFET process from TSMC to an 8nm process from Samsung, which yielded pretty impressive results. Well, RDNA 2 is still based around a 7nm process, although it's pretty impressive the performance that's squeezed out of the same process node, as you'll probably soon see. In fact, they claim that the 6000 series gives 2 times the amount of performance on average in games over last gen. And they did all of this while having a 50% performance per watt improvement over the previous generation. During the announcement, they alluded to the power efficiency of the 6000 series GPUs quite a bit, and we'll have to wait for third parties to confirm that. They also mentioned something in the AMD Radeon software known as Rage Mode. Gimmicky name aside, that basically means that it pushes the card all the way to its limit by maxing out the power draw temp limits, maxing out the clock speeds, etc, etc. They did say that this wouldn't give you a whole lot more performance, but still, one-click overclocking is pretty cool. Another pretty nifty feature that they mentioned is called Smart Access Memory, which allows the GPU's memory to be accessed by a 5000 series CPU on a 500 series motherboard, which should provide a little bit more performance. And as you'll soon see, a lot of the benchmarks that they show, a lot of the graphs, is based on Smart Access Memory being enabled. So just keep that in mind as we move forward. On one of their slides, they actually showed that with Rage Mode enabled and with Smart Access Memory, you could get about a 6 to 7% performance uplift on average, at least according to the small sample of games that they showed in their presentation. Another little feature they talked about was Radeon Boost, which is supposed to be a successor to Radeon Anti-Lag. Basically, it's supposed to reduce latency by providing dynamic resolution based on the input from your mouse, keyboard, or controller, which is also supposed to boost frame rates. They've also added to their suite of Fidelity FX features by adding variable shading, denoising for ray tracing, that's right, ray tracing, as well as ambient occlusion and screen space reflections. The Radeon 6000 series is compatible with DirectX 12 Ultimate, and it's also worth pointing out that the ray tracing is done on a software level on the API, in this case DirectX, as opposed to having dedicated cores for ray tracing like Nvidia does with their RT cores. They're also supposed to have an updated super resolution utility ready, which is basically their form of deep learning super sampling, otherwise known as DLSS. All of these supposedly enhance image fidelity, and right now there are 35 games that support Fidelity FX. Another cool addition is something called Infinity Cache. Infinity Cache is comprised of 128 megabytes of really fast memory that's on the die itself, and it's somewhat comparable to, say, L3 cache on a CPU. AMD said that not only does this speed up operations, it also cuts down on DRAM latency and bottlenecks. Due to this new design, it allows for better performance per watt. It actually makes up a huge part of the performance per watt improvement over last gen. Alright, now let's talk about individual cards. In their lineup, they have the Radeon RX 6800, the 6800 XT, and the 6900 XT. The Radeon RX 6800 can boost up to 2105 MHz, has 16 gigs of G6 memory. That's right, GDDR6 memory, not GDDR6X, but still, there's 16 gigs of it. 16 gigs of VRAM is quite a lot. It has a total board power consumption of only 250 watts, which is, that's pretty low actually for such a powerful card. According to their graphs, this card can run 4K 60, no problem, often more than 4K 60, at the highest possible settings. Although you should probably wait until third-party benchmarks release to make a judgment call. This applies to everything. You should always wait for third-party benchmarks before you make a judgment call on anything. I said it with Zen 3, I'm going to say it with Radeon 6000 series. I mentioned this earlier, but this one was tested with Smart Access Memory enabled. So if you don't have a 500 series motherboard or a Zen 3 CPU, you can expect slightly lower numbers. If we believe their graphs, though, we can see that it beats out the 2080 Ti, which is expected, but get this, the MSRP of this is just $579. Now, don't get me wrong, $579 is still quite a lot for a GPU, but then you realize that the RTX 3080 costs $700. Now, the 6800 is meant to be pitted against the 3070, which the 3070 is $80 cheaper. But remember that the 3070 offers similar performance to the 2080 Ti, meaning that if AMD's claims are true, this card beats out the 3070 by quite a bit, as you've seen in the graphs. Now, if we step up to the 6800's bigger sibling, the 6800 XT, we see some bumps in spec and performance. It has 72 compute units, which is 12 more than the 6800, and a boost clock of 2.25 GHz, 16 gigs of G6 memory, and a total board power consumption of 300 watts, which is 20 watts less than the 3080. Speaking of the 3080, the 6800 XT is pretty much neck and neck with the 3080, and sometimes even edges it out a little bit at 4K and 1440p. Again, take these graphs with a grain of salt, but I really hope that they're accurate because it would be good for everyone. Now, these two cards, the 6800 and the 6800 XT, will launch on November 18th. But what about the biggest, baddest product in the lineup? The 6900 XT has better specs than the 6800 XT, obviously, but with 8 more compute units. It also, get this, it also has the same amount of power draw as the 6800 XT, 300 watts. And since I previously mentioned that there's a 50% performance per watt uplift over previous generation by the 6800 XT, kind of goes down the drain as it's up to 65% with the 6900 XT, if that makes any sense. But what about the performance? Well, yeah. It not only trades blows with the RTX 3090, but it also does this while being significantly smaller, the same size, in fact, as the 6800 XT. It also uses a lot less power than the 3090. The 3090, as we saw, actually had some power draw spikes, which caused weaker power supplies to trigger their overcurrent protection and just shut down. So, as long as the 6900 XT manages to keep its cool, literally and figuratively, then this is great news. Do you think there's a catch with pricing? $999. Again, $1,000 for a GPU is no small amount, but the 3090 costs $500 more. So if AMD's claims are true, then this is great news for all of the consumers. This behemoth of a card will be available on the 8th of December. With all that being said, it's safe to say, don't buy a 30 series graphics card until 6000 series benchmarks have come out. That is, even if you can get your hands on a 30 series graphics card. Which isn't to say that AMD is going to have more stock. They're probably going to run out of stock quickly too. But hopefully AMD's launch won't go as badly as Nvidia's did. But what do you guys think? Are you going to upgrade to a new card? Would you go with Team Red or Team Green? Let me know in the comments down below. But other than that, I've got nothing. If you thought this video sucked, you can hit that dislike button, but if you enjoyed it, drop a like, and consider getting subscribed so you don't miss out on this kind of tech content. As always, thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.